All right, my friends, we are live. This is week 4 Q&A. We are filming this 7:30 Central Time, May 28th, 2024. This is this is our last filming for our initial FT 101. So it's exciting. It's been really fun to roll this out this month, and we've just been testing the waters to see if live Q&A is valuable. We've had great questions. We've had hit or miss on people jumping in on live Q&A. So we'll see if we continue to do it in this format or not, but the questions have been really good. So we know that there's a desire to interact with this content, but we're just testing out the best way to do that. But I've enjoyed jumping on each week with you guys to do these Q&A sessions. As I mentioned, this is our final one. I'm Chris Malney. This is Kevin Adderholt, Josh Reeves. Josh and I've been walking through each of the units, and Kevin Adderholt's been jumping in with us for these Q&A sessions. So we are going to go for 30 minutes or so tonight with some questions related to Unit 4. We have 3 questions here that we will discuss, as well as 7 tips for monthly financials. If any other questions come into chat room or via the live chat that Josh is monitoring for us, we'll get into that and go. We won't go too long because, Kevin's got to go watch his Mavs play tonight, Game 4. He was hot and heavy on the Timberwolves for a while, but now he's really cheering on those Mavs in the finals, or in the Western Conference Finals. So we got Game 4 tonight. So here we go. But guess we'll jump right in unless y'all have anything before we start into the questions.
Let's jump in.
All right. So, Unit 4, we're on financial reporting, and the first question that we have to discuss is, other than tracking revenue expenses, why else would I need these reports? Just talking about just standard financial reports. Answer, why else would I need these reports?
Yeah. What do you think? I'll go to you first.
Well, you need them to make sure that you're executing like your oversight of the church. So you have to have a complete set of financials to make sure that you're capturing all of your transactions. That's just good stewardship 101, but they will come in handy not only for internal use, but if you guys ever get any type of loan, a lot of times if you purchase a building and there's a note attached to that, a lot of times within the note, there's a covenant that says you have to provide financials on some type of basis. In some cases, depending on the size of the loan and the bank, they may even need to be, audited financial statements. And to get an audit, you're going to have to go to the CPA with something in the form of financials. And so really just to be able to open up liquidity in terms of acquiring a property, this is just, fundamental. If you don't have this in place, it's going to be a hard time to sell a bank on extending you credit. And then, one thing we saw with the Paycheck Protection Program, it was nice to have reports in place when that hit. We were doing a lot of extra reporting for folks, but it enabled those applications to get sent through. If you ever are applying for grants, things like that, you're going to need financial reports to submit, and they're going to want to track how you're spending, if you're awarded grant funds, how those are spent. And of course, you'll have to follow up with some type of financial reporting. But there's also, there's a ton of different reasons why, other than just tracking revenue and expenses.
Yeah, I had a couple churches that had, I think it was for their workers' compensation, for their insurance too, they had to have payroll reports, which are a different kind of, you don't normally get those monthly, but just another example of something unexpected that comes up, that if you're not keeping good records and financials, that you might be in a world of hurt and scrambling. So
So also you'd mentioned payroll reporting. There's obviously tax filings for churches around payroll, so another reason why you have to have good reporting.
Yeah, I'd just say, somewhat loosely related. I think even as you're looking to bring people on that you're looking to hire, this is just kind of a recent example. Say, hey, how's the church doing? If you're looking to add people to your team, or specific to your payroll example, just had a request. Can you tell me what my take-home pay is going to be. I got that request. And I was like, well, I mean, that's going to depend on what they elect on their taxes, but you tell them they're gross and then how they fill out the W-4. But you want to have just accurate financial and payroll reports, because there's a slew of things that this all relates to in terms of external. Like if you're like back in the couple rounds of PPP, like you're talking about, if you're working with the bank for any kind of external, and then if you're looking to bring people on, they want to know that you just have good reporting, and then of course to as we've talked about the whole class is you're a manager for the congregation of what they are entrusting to you to use for the purposes that you exist as a church. So, good stuff.
One thing I just thought of as you were speaking, it's also kind of a gut check to see if who you are as a ministry and who you say you are, and your vision and mission. Well, do your financials reflect that? So if you have financials and you can look at them, it can kind of keep you in check in terms of, are we executing on our mission, or do how we spend our money and steward our resources look something completely different? So that's important.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on quickly. You brought out a great point in last week's Q&A about bringing in those benchmarks, and just a quick refresher. If maybe just it's been a while since we talked about it. A benchmark is where you just take like an industry standard, like we want payroll to be 50% of our overall budget. You take those benchmark percentages and you can incorporate those into your reports. We think payroll should be 50%, but our actual spending is 60%. And so I think that's another key is what are we spending versus what we think we should be spending. You can pull in even some of those, industry standard benchmark metrics. That was a great point you brought out last week, Kevin. That's a huge need that or usefulness of these reports. So that's the first question. Second question is, what are the top 3 or 4 things, and we've touched on this already, but anything else you want to draw out on the top 3 or 4 things churches should consider when reviewing monthly reports?
Well, I mean, how are we doing from a revenue standpoint? You have your budget, which is kind of like your plan or your forecast, and so I guess for me, one of the top things that comes down is how are we actually performing against that plan? Mm-hmm. If it can be scary if you've set a budget and it's not being funded, and but you're still incurring expenses as if it were. You start to really, then you start going over to the balance sheet and looking at, how much runway do I have left in terms of cash reserves and things like that. So I think that's kind of the big thing. But then also you want to see, like, drill down on like expenses too, in the same way you would revenue. Are we spending within, is everything in line with what we've planned? Are there any areas that are just expenses that we missed, large items, things that we may need to go back? Because at any point in time, you can still amend the budget regardless of where you're at in the year to cut some expenses if you have to. So just kind of making sure that your things are going reasonably along with the plan that you set before the year started. On the balance sheet, one thing that's kind of ties into what you just said earlier about the metrics. I always like to look at cash, and I like to, kind of related to this topic that we just covered, is looking at your assets, but then also understanding like what's a current asset, looking at your liabilities, and what's a current liability. I don't know if we went too deep into that, but you can take those different sections on the balance sheet and break them out and get better metrics to get what your working capital is, so that you can manage your cash flow and see how much you have on hand, and then also see how that relates to reserves. And so I just think it helps someone who's over governance to make sure that their ministry is going to be funded. No, you definitely hit on the top 3 or 4 things. I don't have a ton to add there, but I think I would just highlight what you said that's really key is just that trend analysis. There is like, hey, we see something in this account that doesn't have a budget. What is this? And are we okay to spend in a line item that doesn't have a budget? Or you see this trend line here. It's like 300, 7,000 this month.
what in the world is that a necessary expense? Let's make sure we understand this and why this is trending this way, and that we're okay with that. So I think you touched on that. It's really, really good. So third question, we'll keep moving. This is a really, really important topic. When we think about just fiduciary responsibility of finance team, of church leadership, what should churches consider regarding risk management? Who wants to jump in first on that one?
I'll ask one of y'all. What do you guys think is, in your opinion, what's the most risky area when it comes to church finance and compliance? What would you think would be the most risky area, or basically the area where a church is going to fall out of compliance with like regulators?
With regulators, man, I think some kind of lawsuit area, like you got to have your insurance. The church is going to get sued because you don't have the right kind of liability insurance, or I think that having the right kind of insurance or HR, like having the right kind of things around like hiring practices, those kind of things in place, was really a little bit out of scope of this. But in terms of like compliance, I think make sure you got like your insurance tied. When I think about risk management, like what could happen that makes us have to close our doors tomorrow? Are we prepared for that? That's what I'm thinking about risk management. On the finance side, that's cash reserves. Do we have cash reserves in place so that what could happen to the building, what could happen on the staffing side, what could happen in our areas of ministry, so we wouldn't have to shut down if the worst case scenario happens. That's what I'm thinking about from a cash management side. And then with that, it's like, do we have the right insurance in place? Do we have the right HR policies in place from a risk management as well?
Yeah, so I mean, churches offer a Sunday gathering. Most churches have a Sunday gathering, and it's open to the public, right? Anyone can come in. There's kids ministries. Things can go wrong. We live in a litigious society, so I mean, you've got these assets. You look at your bank. You may have $500,000 in the bank. You may have a building worth, $3, $4, $5 million or more. If you're not properly insured, that obviously would be you're one lawsuit away, one accident, serious accident away from, financially not being feasible, like your ministry not be feasible to even fund it because you have these, a lawsuit can be a huge liability. I think like around payroll too, like just miss a payroll tax filing, you miss a tax return, or you end up, you misclassify a minister or something like that, and you mess up some poor minister's tax return. There's things that can certainly go wrong. Churches, I think, is from a compliance standpoint, other than making sure you have a good umbrella or general liability policy. Also building, the property and casualty. Like we're having a ton of hailstorms now, right? Like come in, something come through your building, making sure you're properly insured. And then, you're insulated a lot from outside oversight as a church. You don't have to follow 990s and things like that. Really aren't risk of an audit or anything like that. A treasury official would have to come and launch an investigation for you guys to get scrutinized, for a church to get scrutinized. But you do have some payroll, responsibilities. I think that's probably the common one we see, where new clients come to us and they've either tried to do it themselves or just paying people outside of the system and not reporting anything. You certainly don't want to be in that situation. So from a compliance standpoint, I think those are the two main ones.
Yeah.
I don't know what else can go wrong with a church. Like what else?
I mean, you say something?
Well, and I was just going to say something on the insurance side of things. That's a little bit beyond our scope, but when we moved in, even before we had a building, we had a umbrella liability policy, and part of that is just because exactly what you said. You have children's ministries, you have people, ADA, all these different things in a litigious society, and so you want to be covered, because even just defending yourself could wipe
Right.
out your entire, bank account as a church, and then you can't function. And along that line, you mentioned hailstorms, so I just wanted to mention this for any churches that watch this going forward. But insurance companies, especially I'll name Church Mutual, is who we have had in the past, and they've been great. But their underwriters are starting to drop churches in Texas and Oklahoma because of weather-related events, and so make sure you're checking up and making sure those things are getting renewed. And if you need help, we do have contacts who we can refer you that are really good on other underwriters. So anyways, that's going to be an issue with churches too, is insurance companies with all the weather related things are saying, hey, we don't want to cover you because it's, we're having too much loss. So, but that also goes, with you need a liability policy, building policies, etc. And I think the only other thing I would say is it does seem like the most, even if you tie it into why you would need reserves, a lot of the biggest thing that you're having to pay each month is probably payroll. And so that is the one that's kind of the biggest, importance as far as compliance, as far as keeping reserves, because that's ultimately represents people. Although I guess if you have a large loan, it would be pretty bad to run out of money and not pay that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Yeah. And just around this whole thing of risk management, again, as a fiduciary of the organization or charged with governance of a church, your job is to protect a risk so we stay an ongoing entity. And what that means is we have to look at all areas of risk. We have the right cash reserves, we have the right insurance. That's what we've been talking about here for several minutes. Unfortunately, there's been too many cases of church scandal, abuse. There's some really terrible ones right now. We've just seen too many. There's one really high profile one in our area right now that's just been awful to think about. I'm bringing it up because even as a small church, you say we can't bend our HR policies or assume anything about anyone. We have to be objective and hold everyone to the same standards. We can't bend our financial accountability and transparency for anyone. And so when you think about companies like ChurchBiz or other companies like us for $150 a month for payroll or $250 a month for payroll, like small churches can afford that. Most can. Go get that help now. It's very reasonably priced now. I think one of the best decisions we made was to add on HR in the last couple of years. You can essentially, for a very nominal fee, you can have CPAs and good bookkeepers and HR professionals essentially on a retainer for your organization to help manage these risks that can keep you out of big time trouble that we're seeing in too many churches right now. So I can't say that strongly enough. Unfortunately, we're just seeing too many issues popping up right now. Just make sure you take this stuff seriously.
And a lot of times it's the finance committee that's leading out in this too, so I don't know, for a smaller church, who's thinking through insurance, right? Like, I mean, you look back on your experience, you just kind of knew as the church planner, you probably needed to have that, right? But that's something that could fall in the cracks in terms of like not renewing, or just that life goes on. And so a lot of times it's finance committee that, you at least kind of note that somewhere within your processes or your roles and responsibilities just to make sure as you assess risk. I mean, that's a very important one, insurance policies, that they're in place. And a lot of times your church is going to really depend on you to bring that up.
Well, and we mentioned financial reporting. Not a funny story, but a related story is a couple months ago, I was looking at our church's financials and I didn't see a payment for insurance. And so it was one of those things where, okay, have we paid our insurance? Did we get dropped and not know it? Thankfully, it was just getting paid somewhere else and I missed it. But another reason to pay attention to your financials. Make sure your insurance policies have been paid and are up.
Yeah. All right. So anything else on these topics, these first three questions?
I think we've covered it pretty good. And you guys hopefully have got to watch lesson 8. It's a big question and answer we did. So we've also done some of these in lesson 8. So yeah.
Josh, do you want to walk us through these tips on financial reportings? We've got about 11 minutes.
Yeah, let's. We put together a list. We wanted to give you something, just kind of some best tips and practices And so you guys feel free to chime in here too, but I'll just kind of run through this, and y'all stop me as you need to, or delete one of my things if you have something better, So number one, we put down request your reports in a format that works for your finance team. So essentially what I mean by that is we've had people sometimes that have a finance team that they're reading most things on their phone or tablet, and sometimes Excel doesn't work great, and so they want PDFs, and that's totally fine. We'd want them to read those and use those reports. Other teams might want Excel. Other teams might need a few tweaks, but I would just say request from your bookkeeping firm or us at ChurchBiz reports where your team will actually read them. So that's something you can ask, and well, worst we can do is say no, right? Yeah. Get too fancy, we might say no. Number two, always make sure your net income ties out with the balance sheet and P&L. Mm-hmm. So that's a quick check that you can do. As soon as you see a P&L, look at net income, look at net income on the balance sheet. Those numbers should be the same. You don't even have to be an accounting whiz to match that up. If that's off, then you kick it back.
Trash it.
Yeah, you
trash
it.
Throw it away.
If it's off, then that means you're either looking at a cash on one and accrual on the other, or you've got a filter on one, but or your data's corrupt.
Yeah.
So something's you gotta dig and figure that out.
Maybe they ran it, a couple days apart.
Your dates are wrong. Dates are wrong, but
it's not complete financials. Is that good accounting talk?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
It's working towards that CPA exam. One day you're gonna.
If only the taxes weren't on there. I can't think of that. Number three, understand your liability accounts on the balance sheet. So I would just say simply on that, especially your current liabilities, I would say just being able to explain if someone had a question, what would that mean? So why is this balance here? Well, here's the reason for that. So being able to explain it, and if you can't explain it, ask your CPA to help you understand that item on the liability accounts. Really, all of the accounts you should understand to a degree, but I think those
are ones that can get out of control.
Yeah, those can get out of control.
Liability accounts grow; they become just nobody even really looks at them, and you just know if something's there and you can't explain it. Some P&L somewhere in history is wrong, right? Yeah. Like something was wrong. It may not. You hope it wasn't significant at that point.
It feels like those are kind of like little engine lights that if you'll notice it when it's yellow, it'll save you from getting in the red later.
Exactly.
So you can track something down. Number four, I put track fund details for expenses booked directly into your balance sheet funds. So you might have a fund or two on your balance sheet that receives revenue directly and expenses are paid out of that directly. And I would say if that's the case, just request a detail report for that so that nothing's kind of just slipping in and out unseen, because those transactions would not be recorded on your profit and loss. Number five, send out reports in a way that best suits all who need them. What I meant by that one is basically, so for example, your finance team, they might get the full reports, all the details, everything. Your staff team, they might just get a budget remaining report or a budget versus actuals report to help them track the budget. Your congregation might get just a summary level view report. So you can think through the different layers at your church, but try to serve people by giving them the reports that they need. Not all your staff, they don't need to be combing through 7 tabs on a spreadsheet to find their budget items. Try to get it to them as simple as you can, and think through every level in that way. Number 6, we kind of mentioned this earlier when we were talking about some of the top things to pay attention to when reviewing reports, but number 6 is pay attention to expenses that are uncategorized or coded to accounts without a budget. And I would say set a goal of all uncategorized income or expenses. You might swing by with a month or two of those being there, but I would say by the end of the year, especially, having all of those items addressed. You guys can speak into that if you want to clarify, but I think it's pay attention to those just because you don't want to let them linger too long.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, you're spot on. I think it was lesson 5. We're talking about different tools that we use. Bill, spend, and expense can be a little finicky. If you make a change in the chart of accounts, it'll just dump it into uncategorized expense. So I put on my checklist, check uncategorized expense monthly, because I don't want it sitting there if it doesn't need to be, because that's not the most accurate place for it to be. But certainly quarterly and definitely fiscal year end, you don't want anything sitting in uncategorized expense, because that's not that's just not right.
If you
Bad form.
Bad
Yeah.
form. Yeah.
if you see that in your reports that you're getting from your bookkeeper, ask them, hey, what's going on there? And maybe they'll say, well, your staff's not coding it, and that's one option.
Get your expense
Or
report
it could
in.
be a
Come on.
sync issue.
It's like, I love QuickBooks.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
ask my accountant. If you don't leave something that says "Ask my accountant," like at the end of the year, put it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I had mentioned coded. If you might see something that is coded, but occasionally I'll have clients that it's going to an account that, when you're coding it, you're not always looking at the budget, so you're just coding it as you're told. But you see, oh, there's no budget category for this. Maybe that was supposed to go somewhere else. So as you're reviewing those reports, you might ask your staff or whoever's responsible for coding, hey, I see you're coding, the printer to an old admin expense account, and we've moved that to office supplies. That's where actually the budget is. So try to just pay attention to those things. You don't want to see a bunch of expenses that are going to the old accounts or something you didn't put a budget for. You could also have just forgot to budget for it, and that's another thing it can alert you to. But yeah, number 7, and then we'll wrap up. We're going to be right on time here. This is the one that we talked about earlier, but make sure to seek answers if an account balance looks off. So for example, if the office supplies account has been $300 a month for 5 months in a row, and you see that nice and pretty same number for 5 months, and then in month number 6 you see $7,000, you need to know and you might have to ask questions. Why is that jumping up to $7,000? Staff, what happened? This account's normally pretty regular. What's going on here? These are the good type of questions to ask your staff, to ask your bookkeeper. They can get into the detail, help you see what's going on there, and then you can figure that out. But those are kind of little clues, again, that either there was a one-time purchase that threw this off that we want to make sure, yes, that's where it should go, or something got miscoded that shouldn't have been here, and that's why it jacked this expense way up. So there's my 7 tips for best utilizing your monthly reports.
That's good. We've got about 3 minutes left, so let me kind of help us land the plane here in our maiden voyage of FT 101. Josh, I'll just kick this to you. We kind of look forward here. Maybe you could throw out for listeners that have done kind of this live portion of our first FT 101, what's on the horizon for classes with Church Biz and how they can help if FT 101 has been a benefit to them, what you would suggest.
Yeah. So I'll answer the first question first. We're thinking about launching 1 or 2 more courses this year. We'd love to hear from you, by the way, if you have feedback on what you would like to see more of. But one of those is a course for church planters that would walk a church planter through the essential early steps of going from, hey, I want to plant a church, to how do I get a bank account, to how do I get my entity set up, basically all those steps that they need to do to get set up in a healthy way financially. We're thinking about putting a course together for them. And then we're also thinking about another course that really dives into more detail on budgeting, where we would probably even have some more specific conversation with the participants about their unique budget challenges. So we're still working through that, but we're thinking about potentially the church planning course launching in late summer, and the budgeting course may be coming out right around budget season. We'll probably at least launch one of those, but we'd love to hear your feedback on what would best serve you. Again, our heart is really to create content that helps serve local churches and equip finance teams. And then the second thing you asked, Chris, is if you've been blessed by this course, if you think it was helpful, we would love for you to share it. You can share that registration link. You can email me if you know people who, and then I can talk to them about it and share with them about it. But we'd love for you to share it on social, email other churches. We're trying to get the word out to let people, we're not trying to pressure anyone. We just want people to know this resource is out there. And so, however, that's one way you could help us, is by just sharing it with other churches, and as other finance teams ask you questions, pass this on if it's been a help. So yeah.
That's good. Yep. Any final thoughts, reflections on FT 101? No.
We'll see if we're learning things as we go through the course. So we're trying to discern what is helpful, what is not helpful. So again, like you mentioned at the beginning, it seems that live might not be as big of a value as we thought, but I do think these Q&As are really valuable. So we might just continue to record, occasional Q&As for the classes. But yeah, I think this has been a great learning experience, and hopefully it's helpful. So.
Yeah, I've been encouraged by the sign up so far, and I think just we're just even going to continue to get the word out. We're just wrapping up. We got something there?
We got a buzzer beater.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
Dan put it, either it came in late or Dan just put it in. But Dan, Dan, you've had some great questions by the way too. So we got a buzzer beater.
That's
awesome.
We
got it right in before the buzzer. So
let's do it. Let's do it.
So let's do it. He asked, do church biz accountants look for yellow and red flags when they provide financial reports? I haven't seen this with the reports, but it would be helpful to help our finance teams in the review. So essentially saying, do you guys notice things and kind of call them out?
Yeah, I do. But I mean, I've worked with some organizations that have just really, it's been just cash flow issues. So things that are trending in a negative way, and they just need to be aware of, hey, I'm looking at your budget and how you're spending and kind of the trends of revenue, and you've got 3 months left, and then it's and I don't know. Again, we're not the ones that are tasked with governance and monitoring the risk of the church. That's for the finance committee, whoever the elders or however you're governed, whoever's responsible for that, that's their risk. But yes, if something sticks out from like a fictitious vendor standpoint, absolutely. That's a common theft is, somebody can create a fictitious, make up a vendor name, link it to a bank account, send it as a payment request if they've got info, like access to like where people submit check requests and things like that. That's something to look out for as we pay bills. And then of course, any payroll items too can be, there could be red flags that come in terms of, unreasonable housing allowances, things like that. But again, it would really have to be something that I would see as a big risk that, we would raise the flag. Otherwise, if it's just misclassification issues, things like that, those are things we follow up with our contact with. Each service rep will work with their contact to make sure that we're recording things that, and that our systems are acting as they should. But overall, like consulting, it would just have to be egregious things that we would see that we would, raise concerns for. So anything to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. It's, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is like, I view my role is to notify and inform those charged with governments of things we see in our line of work that they may not be aware of because we're working in the details of their financial transactions. And so, my past job working as a financial controller, it was my job to see those things and make decisions on those things. And so I had to learn to make that shift. Now I need to notify so you can make those decisions, which is exactly what Dan is asking. Are you going to raise the flags for me? Like Kevin said, absolutely. And the way that I'll typically do that is call that out in the financial reports. Like I'll put like a bullet point list of X, Y, Z, unless it's something that needs attention today. If it raises to that level of like, this looks like a fraudulent payment. Are you aware of that? Send that to my contacts, and then they make the decision, and you're raising the issue, notifying, and letting them make the decision. So that's certainly part of that risk management within the deliverables that we are contracted. If something seems fraudulent, seems negligent, or just seems what's the word I'm looking for? Out of trend enough to cause just something that I would want to be aware of as a decision maker, then I'll raise the issue and let the decision makers make the decision.
And there's a lot of things too that before we even because a lot of times the clients we're working with, we're making sure the balance sheets are exactly where they need to be, that we are issuing complete financial statements. Now, things may not be categorized exactly to the expense account. That goes back to the process, but the financials are complete. But what clients don't see, and one of the benefits of outsourcing, so kind of putting on the sales hat here, are the things we sweat over for a church. So it's, making sure that the 941 tax reports are being filed on a timely basis quarterly, making sure tax deposits are clearing with the IRS at year end, scrubbing 1099 vendor lists. Like these are all things where those are the red flags in our profession. And that's how we serve the church the best way, is we've already brought those into our kind of line of sight and have addressed those through a standard service offering. And that's part of the value that we add for the church when you contract with us. And so that's kind of built into it. Now, a lot of that doesn't ever make it to your desk over at the church because we're handling it fully on the back end on our side. But from time to time, as we do review financials, we may have an eye for completeness. But if something does stick out, absolutely we will communicate that to the client.
I like that CPA exam buzzword there, completeness. I like that. I like that. That's a good word. But I said that kind of joking way, but that is a big deal. I mean, that's important. And to tie in Dan's question, I think to land this plane of lessons learned, I think things that are important, we want to raise those issues, make you aware, while also not crossing the line and step over and do things that those charged with governance are tasked to do. So that's the line we have to walk. But what's important to me and what I value is I love the work that we get to do, but we're not here. My hope is not just to be seen or our company be seen just as a commodity of churches. Okay, can we provide this service at the cheapest cost? And that's why churches are going to come work with us. Part of why we're doing this class is we want to have a long-term relationship with you. We want to be seen as consultants who are knowledgeable across a lot of different areas, who's going to be a long-term partner with your ministry. And so when you work with us, you're going to get who we are. You're going to get the DNA of who we are as a company, of Chris, Kevin, Josh, Brandy, Audrey, Michelle, Donna, just our whole team. And so that's just a value we have. And so one of the things that's come out in this class is not just the nuts and bolts of doing this work, but the spiritual reasons why. And so if you watch the videos, you've seen a lot of that. And that's just kind of core to who we are. And I think we'll always be a part of that at Church Biz. So that's been I told that surprised me a little bit how much of that came out in the course, but I think that's just what this FT 101 was supposed to be this round. So I've just enjoyed it, and just thanks for the participation. Dan threw a lot of great questions our way. Good, yeah. Enjoyed working with you. And any closing thoughts?
Go Mavs.
Go Wolves.
Let's go Celtics.
All right. Fun stuff, guys. All right. Talk to you later.